What's up, though? I was reading this scripture found out of the book of Songs, Song of Solomon, and I stopped in verse 7 of chapter 2. It reads like this. It says, I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or the does of the field, that you not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. It's an interesting scripture. And so this is a book of love. It's a love book. And the queen, Solomon's queen, is writing about her king, Solomon. And she writes to the daughters of Jerusalem. And she tells them that, I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or the does of the field, that you not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. And it's a recurring thing that she says. She says the same thing in verse 5. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or the does of the field, that you not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. Chapter 8, verse 4. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, that you not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. And so it's a recurring theme that she writes to these daughters of Jerusalem. Don't stir up love until it pleases, until it's the right time. And so I thought about God and how at the right time, he does all things. Galatians 4 and 5, it says, but when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law. And so just at the right time, God sent forth his Son Jesus to be born of a virgin. And this happened after a 400-year period of silence. God was not speaking through any prophets. He was not speaking through anybody. It was quiet. But those 400 years, there was a lot going on. And one of those things was the Roman Empire coming into power and creating roads that reached all nations. And so traveling and carrying news was easier, and there were, I believe, relatively safe roads, because the Roman army used to watch these roads. And so once these roads were done, roads that would make it easier to carry news, like good news, the gospel, then God sent his Son, Jesus, born of a woman. And so he waited 400 years for all this to come to be, and then he sent his Son. Romans 5:6 says, for while we were still weak, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. 2 Corinthians 6:2 says, "For he says, in a favorable time I listened to you, and in a day of salvation I have helped you." It reminds me of the time that I cried out to God. When I finally cried out to God in sincerity and truth, he heard me. But there was a time when I was kind of crying out to God, but not really. And so God didn't respond. In that time, he allowed me to continue to keep hitting my head and making mistakes until he brought me to that place of complete brokenness where I sincerely cried out to him. And at that time, he heard me and he saved me. And so there was no mistaking, like, God saved me. There was no mistaking that God helped me at that time. And so he waited until I reached that place. And then at that right time, he heard me. It was the perfect time. And I surrendered. And so I bring this all up because that's what we're to do. And that's what the Queen is writing to the daughters of Jerusalem, to not stir up love until it's the appropriate time. And so I was thinking, I was like, what story in the Bible can I share to illustrate that there's a wrong time to do something, and if it's not the right time, it's gonna be bad. And so I thought of the story of Abraham and Sarah and how they didn't wait. God had promised Abraham to make a great nation out of him. His offspring would be great. He promised them a child. Yet Sarah and Abraham were anxious to have a baby. And so Sarah tells Abraham to go into her maidservant Hagar, and conceive and have a child through her. And so they do. And this is what happens. It says, "Now Sarah, Abraham's wife, had bore him no children. She had a female Egyptian servant whose name was Hagar. And Sarah said to Abraham, 'Behold, now the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go unto my servant, it may be that I shall obtain children by her.' And Abraham listened to the voice of Sarah. So after Abraham had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarah, Abraham's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, her servant, and gave her to Abraham, her husband, as wife. And he went into Hagar, and she conceived, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. And Sarah said to Abraham, 'May the wrong done to me be on you. I gave my servant to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May the Lord judge between you and me.' But Abraham said to Sarah, 'Behold, your servant is in your power. Do to her as you please.' Then Sarah dealt harshly with her, and she fled from her." And so we can see that Sarah and Abraham, they didn't wait for the right time. They jumped the gun, and they had this good plan. Sarah had this good plan: go into my maidservant Hagar and conceive and bear a child through her, and it would be as that child was theirs. And he did. But what happened? Their relationship was fractured. It was no longer good, and Sarah was harsh to her servant, and her servant fled from her. She no longer had a place of residence. And so, yeah, they didn't wait till the right time. It's also said that this child that came from Hagar is where the believe it's the Arab nations or the Muslim nations come from the line of Ishmael. And they believe that they're the right line because Ishmael is the first child and not Isaac. And so they believe they're God's chosen people. And so we can see how messed up the Middle East is because of these beliefs. And so because Abraham and Sarah didn't wait for the right time, this happened. And so we gotta wait. I can think of, myself being a single man, wanting to be in a relationship. And I remember one time I met a sister, and she was pretty, and she was a Christian. She had no children. And I was like, why not jump in this relationship? But I knew deep in my heart that wasn't what the Lord had for me. But I settled. I was like, I'm going to do it anyway. I didn't wait for the right time. I stirred up love too quickly. And what happened? What happened is that our relationship ended up bad. We ended up breaking up within I think 2 months. And it wasn't on good terms. It was on bad terms. I thank God that we are on good terms now, but it took forever to reconcile that relationship. But if we would have waited at the right time, then it would have been good. I'm sure we've all heard of marriages that ended in divorce, children being had without proper employment on the parents' part to be able to care for a child. And that's because they stirred up love too quickly. It wasn't the right time. And so thinking about all this, it just led me to meditate that we gotta wait for the right time, the Lord's time, for him to provide what we desire, what we've been praying for, what he's promised us. And let it not be too soon or too late. Let us not jump the gun, because when we do, we can see through Abraham and Sarah that nothing good came of it. With my relationship with that sister, it was bad for a minute, because we jumped the gun. And so we're to be like God, right? Where he waits till just the right time to move, and then he moves. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 reads like this: a time for everything. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to cast away. A time to tear and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. And so we can see that there's a time for everything under the sun. And so let us not stir up love too early, because nothing good will come from that.